Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Shut the Front Door podcast, brought to you by Harvey, Goodman, Realtor. My name is Johnny Kazemka, and this is the podcast, the real talk about real estate podcast. And today we have Tony Edmond with the offices of Edmond and Baum, the law offices of Edmond and Baum. So good morning.
Good morning, Johnny. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, anytime. And I think this is your first time here on at least the podcast. But today you wanted to talk about an interesting side of the industry that I'm knowledgeable enough to be dangerous. So you're here to expend some expertise on the world of title. So and there's Scott behind you. So just comes in right at the perfect time. So so real estate title. You had some thoughts and some concerns of that you wanted to explain.
Yeah, I did. There's one thing I wanted to talk about, and that was specifically this notion that when someone does a real estate title search and they find a problem, it's with the goal of killing the deal or somehow kills the deal, and we should just ignore it and move on, and that's not the case. So I wanted to have a conversation about that generally. Today's conversation will be more academic than anything, so
Sure.
people have specific questions or their specific situation needs particular legal attention. It needs to come down to them speaking with an attorney one-on-one. This is more academic to get people thinking about it, so don't construe this as specific legal advice for your particular situation.
Right. Yeah. And we'll put all the contact info if someone has a more elaborate question, or even hopefully, I don't want to say hopefully, but if someone has a need for your actual legal services, we'll take it to the next step with private conversation. But yeah, you're here to expand the knowledge of the why this is so important, and why when you find a problem, it's not with any ill intent to harm someone or kill a deal, as you had just said. That's your job. That's what you're hired to do.
Exactly.
So when you say title, I know what you're talking about, but the general public, I would imagine, doesn't have a firm grasp on when you say title issues. What do you mean by title issues?
Right. So any individual, once you sign a purchase and sale agreement, essentially you agree to buy a house. The next step is to do a title search. What that means is we're going to look at the history of the ownership of the house and make sure there's no reoccurring problems that once your deal is closed that are going to follow you going forward. You don't want to inherit the problems of somebody else. So title search is to identify whether any exists, and if they do, then make a decision about how you want to move forward. Do you want to fix the problem? Do you want to go on to something else? We'll go into more specifics in a moment, but that's the general idea behind those title searches, is to keep you, the potential new owner, from taking the problems of previous owners along with you as you move forward with the house.
Yeah, and problems in real estate are plenty. They can be problems that are physical in nature, whether it's a building inspection or an appraisal issue. It could be a title issue. It could be numerous different things. But out of the problems that we experience, title tends to be the most complicated, and it's arguably, in my opinion, the most important part of the process, because someone discovers a broken window or a bad furnace. Those things can kind of be replaced and nuanced around, and we have homeowners insurance for things that break. It's hard when there's a title issue pertaining to, let's just say there was a possessory interest where a power of attorney was recorded improperly or was never recorded, and now the person trying to sell it doesn't even have the legal authorization to sell the property. We inherit these things all the time. So what you're saying is, if you were to buy a property with that, let's just say you had a big bag of money cash and you bought it without doing a title search, what are you going to experience later in life as the new owner?
Right. And then that circumstance, you really have two avenues. One, you can just close your eyes, cross your fingers, and hope there's no issues. Or you can have a professional do the title search to search the history of the house to make sure that there aren't any outstanding issues. And I want to try to give one example I think a lot of people will understand. Usually people need to get a mortgage to buy a house. That circumstance also can exist if you need to have home improvements. So if people need to put a new roof on, or they want to put in a new kitchen or a new bathroom, something along those lines, they can take out an additional loan from a bank, say $25,000 loan, to get the new kitchen put in. Well, let's say they do that, they do the work, the kitchen gets put in, the bank shells out the money to the contractor, and now they say, okay, we are making a pledge to you that we're going to give you this money, and in return, you have to say, well, if I don't pay this money back, then you can use the house, come in and sell it to try to recoup your $25,000. So now if someone takes out that loan, gets the new kitchen, and then turns around and says, I'm going to sell the house to somebody else, and doesn't pay the money back, Well, then the new owner, if they don't do a title search, they don't see that $25,000 needs to be paid back to the bank. Well, now the bank's going to come and say, hey, you're the new owner. We have $25,000 outstanding. Now you owe the money.
Right, because the loan itself was never attached to the person borrowing it. It was attached to the property. And
Exactly.
And that's what people misunderstand. Well, I didn't pay for that. I didn't take the loan out. Doesn't matter. The loan was secured with the asset, the house itself. They use that. They call that, what is the technical term? Lease pendes, or is that?
Well, that's something unrelated.
Yeah, but see, this is why I'm enough to be dangerous. But
Right.
it's a lien on the property, right? They will literally force that onto the new owner, and it's not just mechanics work. It could be credit cards. It could be other things, judgments. It could be things of that nature. That anything that's attached taxes, anything that's attached to the property. See these sticky notes? Think of it like this, at least my oversimplification, sticky notes. If someone were to write this and say there's an invoice and put it on the side of the house, it's the same thing. As long as it's attached to the property, whoever buys it, if you don't do a title search, you run the risk of inheriting all those sticky notes, if you will.
Yeah, that's very true. And I think a more simplistic example is if you take out a loan to buy a car and you stop paying on the loan, they're going to come get the car.
Right.
They're going to take the car back from you because the car itself is what's used to as collateral for the loan. You don't pay the loan back, the bank's going to take the car back and sell it to try to recoup the money. It's very similar with a house. There's a process that they can undertake to sell the house on behalf of the bank, or if, let's say, you get construction work done, it's $50,000, you don't pay it back, well, they put what's called a mechanics lien against the house to recoup their $50,000. And in that circumstance, if someone comes in and buys the house and doesn't take care of that mechanics lien to pay that contractor's $50,000 back, then the new homeowner is holding the bag for that $50,000.
And that's something that we do at the settlement. So again, just kind of going over with the general public, if there's a lien on the property for $25,000, but the house sells for $100,000, they take that $25,000 out of the sale itself and everything. When you buy the property, you're buying it free and clear. After they go through your title search, you're buying it free and clear of any clouds on title, which would include liens or misrecorded documents or anything of that nature. So why on earth would anybody look at you as the bad person because you found something that is, walk me through, because in my line, you are my world. That's what I'm hiring you to do. So it blows my mind that people would say, oh, you're just trying to kill a deal.
Right. Well, there are a lot of people who simply get excited at the prospect of buying a house, and there are real estate agents, for example, who are just interested in the prospect of getting a commission on the sale of the house.
Sure.
So they just want to close it. Then their excitement level gets tamped down, and people take it personally.
I see.
It's not something to take personal. In your example, if you're buying a house for $100,000 and there's a $25,000 lien, that means the previous owner who's selling the house to you needs to send $25,000 to cover that lien, in our example, to the bank. They get to pocket $75,000. You've still, as the new buyer, spent only $100,000. That's what you agreed to, and now you're buying the house free and clear.
Right.
But if you don't do that, you pay the previous owner $100,000. They don't take $25,000 to pay that loan back. Well, now you're on the hook for that $25,000. So you're going to end up spending at least $125,000 now,
right,
rather than the original $100,000 that you were planning
on debt that you never created. Congratulations, you just bought someone else's American Express debt.
Yeah, exactly. And now, are there ways to go after the individual from the past? Sure, but a lot of times they're not going to have $25,000 to even pay you.
Sure.
And as far as the bank in this circumstance is concerned, they're just looking at the house. We don't care what you do going forward. We want our money back.
Right.
So, and if you can't pay us, then we're gonna sell the house to recoup that $25,000.
So I've said this 1,000 times in different podcasts, and people are probably going to get sick of me saying it again. But the easiest way to abandon rational thought is emotion. Right, usually negative emotion, but even hyper emotion. Someone like you said is so hyper focused, whether they want the house that badly, or even in my world, there are agents that are so self-serving that they just want the deal to close by any means necessary. They don't care about, I want to say, don't care about the client, but they're more interested in closing the deal than they are.
They're more hyper focused on just closing a deal than looking at the broad the big picture.
So that negative news that you give creates this reaction, I would say, rather than a innate understanding of why this is so important. So, and we can disagree. I mean, there's times where I'm not always right. There are times in the industry where, but look, our realms, especially your realm, being in the world of legal advice, this isn't the customer is always right. Okay. It's not because it's the reason why we hire medical professionals or accounting professionals, real estate professionals, legal professionals. It's the reason why it's a professional level field. And we've grown up in this world where at least my opinion is everything has been catered to having it custom to, go to Burger King. The logo is have it your way. We live in a world where Comcast is called on demand, right? That's what people,
right.
I don't know, people get the Facebook law degree and then they want to dispute because you're doing your job correctly. But now that they're not satisfied because you gave them something they didn't want to hear, you're the villain because you're trying to kill the deal somehow. How does it even benefit you from killing a deal?
It doesn't.
Right. It doesn't make any sense. I don't get it.
No, it absolutely doesn't. And in fact, if I do say 10 title searches, the problem with 9 of them, and the buyers and now they're the owners come back later and say, hey, all these problems existed and you didn't do anything about it. Well, now they're going to be coming after me,
right,
for not saying something about it.
Well, so what do you do in that instance when you do a title search and everything's clean? Yeah, do you want to expand, I guess, upon title insurance and what that means and how that would all work?
Well, I guess the simplest way to say it is if everything's clean, we say to the would-be buyer, to the bank, depending upon who the client is, hey, everything's fine. I'm signing off on this deal going through, but if you happen to come across a problem that I've missed, you come back to me and I'm going to handle it.
Right.
That's the way that works. So it's me giving a guarantee that everything's fine. Now, if I find that there's a problem, I'm not going to come to them and say everything's clean. I'm going to say this is an issue and we need to take care of it now before it becomes a bigger issue down the road.
Correct.
We don't want that snowball effect to continue. So there is something at stake for someone like me as well, because we want to make sure that what I say is actually how things are. There's value in doing those title searches. You issue a title opinion or you can buy a title policy without going into the weeds. Bottom line is it's saying everything's clean. I give you my word, it's fine. I'm going to put it on paper,
right,
to state as such. And if there's an issue, you come back to me and then we'll try to work through it. It's always easier to work through that issue before a deal closes than after.
Yeah, and trying to do it retroactively. Yeah, and I've not experienced so many of those issues, and even the ones that I have had. I think you talked about one, maybe it was off camera, but when I bought our house over in Yorkville, it was done through a land contract. The previous owner was done through a land contract, not mine.
Right.
And it was actually of record. It was done properly. A lot of times people, we get them in the messages, we're looking for land contract options, and they think they're just going to pay X amount of dollars for the next 30 years. It's not. It's oversimplified. Anyways, this one was actually off record at the courthouse, and when we bought the property, put a new roof on, did all these other, and I get a message one day, a letter in the mail that says that this person was still entitled to the property because it was never released there,
right.
Which was not the case. But I mean, I do this for a living, and the cloud the title search was done, it was clean, and I still had that show up, and someone was saying that they were going to take my house back. They had a possessory interest in it.
Right.
It's terrifying, and there's no way in this world that I would ever advise if you're going to buy a house. Inspections are voluntary. The appraisal is most likely going to be forced if you're borrowing money from the bank. But let's just say I had a big bag of money cash, and you technically just go and hand it over and get a deed and not do a title search. A title search is essential. It is the only thing that I don't even know that I would really want to represent a buyer who wasn't going to do a title search.
Right.
I mean, I'm serious. It's that strict because I don't want something to survive closing and say, well, hold on a second, you didn't tell me to do this. Or in your world, people disagree with, this. It's crazy.
Yeah, and I think that there are certain situations in which people think that something's not a big deal. Mm-hmm. This isn't a big deal. This doesn't need to kill this deal.
Sure.
Okay. Well, it's not a big deal to you today because you're not getting what you want right away, and you don't get that instant gratification. But if you don't get it now, if we try to get that instant gratification now and ignore all the problems aren't going to go away. I mean, there's no way you're going to buy a house that has a roof that's collapsing in without being told that the roof is collapsing in.
Right.
Say, okay, I want that to be fixed. Right? The title search is no different. It's just a different avenue of a roof collapsing in, and say, hey, do you want this roof to be fixed before you buy it?
Right.
Or do you want to try to fix this after you buy it where it's all on you rather than on the previous owner? And to me, that's a no-brainer.
Well, and physical things that you can see, and even I would even call latent defects, even the defects that you can't see. Maybe there's stuff behind the wall, for example. To me, those are the easier the things to fix, and especially the ones that you can't see. You mentioned a broken roof or broken roof truss or whatever. When you buy a house without a title search, it is a complete gamble. Because while we can look at a roof and say, okay, reasonable expectation, we can spend X amount of dollars on assessing it, valuing it, whatever. How do I know how much debt the seller has wrapped up in the property?
Right.
So that roof might be $10,000, $20,000 to replace. I don't know that this person didn't rack up a $70,000 gambling debt by taking out cash advances on their Visa, and now they're attaching it to the property. I don't know that they didn't pay their state or federal taxes. I don't know that they didn't, like, all these things. A roof is something I can look at and value and estimate. If I don't do a title search and I don't see what's on record, there's no way for me to estimate what someone else could have had concealed.
Right. And when you talk about something like taxes and not paying them, a lot of times if someone doesn't pay their income tax, and after a certain amount of time passes and the government still hasn't been able to attach it, they'll put a lien on file and say every piece of real property that John Doe owns is now attached. And until this tax lien is paid, we have the right to get any and all of his property to recoup the money if we deem that that's necessary.
Sure.
Well, the only way you're going to know that happened is if you do an actual title search.
Right.
Now, there are certain rules and parameters that you don't have to follow that individual all over the country. And they get there's California taxes that they own, but you're here in Belmont County, Ohio, or you're in Ohio County, West Virginia. You didn't see that there's different rules that dictate what happens in those circumstances. But to be as simple as possible, if someone lives in Ohio County, they're not paying their West Virginia income tax. They're just simply not paying it. And a lien is put on file to show that. And you buy a house that they owned and you don't pay that lien off. Well, the state can come back and say, hey, you owe us this money because it's attached to the house.
Right.
And so our only avenue to get this money is to institute a foreclosure sale of this house.
Right.
And now you're out of luck. Now you can go after that individual if you can find them to try to get the money back directly from them. But then you run into a situation where they probably don't have any money on themselves. And so if you get a judgment against them for $100,000 and they don't have anything, you're never going to see that money.
Big deal. Yeah. Insolvent debtor. If they didn't have the money to pay their taxes, what makes you think that they're going to have the money to pay you back? And on top of that, the legal defense, everything else that goes with that whole entire, it's just not even a feasible thing to even think of. So again, you getting involved up front, fighting these issues, disclosing those issues is by no means in any way, shape, or form of an effort for you to just want to kill a transaction, which is just so mind-boggling to me.
Exactly. And for those who are watching or listening and think this is a giant headache, you're right, it is. And the easiest way to avoid that is have the title search done, listen to what the attorney says is the problem, and listen to what they suggest as the solutions to those problems and follow through.
Correct. Yeah. I mean, and if you think it's a headache now dealing with it, at least you're given the opportunity, the alternative. Because I put it this way, even if you give an opinion and people want to disagree with it, that's their right. They can disagree with it all they want. That's fine. And if you want to make decisions based off of that newfound knowledge that you have, even if you disagree with that knowledge, that's fine too. Just so you know, if you find yourself in harm's way, you've done your due diligence, you've done your job correctly, you're not the bad person. And if something comes up after the fact that, hey, they made a bad decision, that's their choice. But again, you're not here to be a villain. It's kind of almost like trying to, I don't know, give another example. Like most dictatorships fail. It's it's really hard when people don't want to receive bad news. They don't operate from a sense of truth. So you're not making if you don't want to receive bad news, if you're that scared, if you're that angry, or if you're not going to be receptive to the idea of just receiving something that you don't want to hear, you omit from the conversation what you truly need to hear to make rational decisions.
Exactly. And no one's telling you what's going on, then you can't make informed decisions.
Right.
It just goes completely out the window. And to bring it back to the house example, you spend $100,000 to buy a home, and it turns out there's $200,000 in loans. Well, you just turned your would-be $100,000 asset acquisition, something that could benefit you, into a $200,000 problem that is nobody else's problem but your own, because you just accepted it, because you just decided, I'm not going to do my due diligence. I'm not going to listen to anybody else. I'm going to take on this problem. Now it's my issue. Now I'm going to end up spending $300,000 just to get back to zero.
Right. In the world of AI that we live in now, too, this is becoming probably more and more, I would say, more common, at least more frequent, not more common, more frequent, because people will now go and buy a for sale by owner, or people have started to, I don't know how many law degrees have been gotten off of Facebook or YouTube, how many real estate licenses have been gotten. I got my electrical engineering degree off of YouTube, all this nerd stuff that you see around me, but I'm by no means a computer expert or electrical engineer. I know how to do enough to be dangerous. And that Dunning-Kruger aspect of it, that people have grown way too complacent, way too comfortable with trying to take on things that are well beyond the scope of their ability. And that immediate willingness to disagree and to combat that, because and to paint someone like you out to be a deal killer because you bring bad news. Sorry, best of luck to you in all of your endeavors. But man, you really got to get a new perspective on life.
Right, and I think there are a lot of situations. And for the record, so everyone knows, I also have my real estate broker's license in West Virginia. The things that we're talking about. So I have, I think, a more holistic view of these things than most might. But
sure,
there are definitely a lot of people who, I know someone who sold their house sale by owner. It was no problem. Everything was fine. It was a cash deal, and they got to save a ton of money, and that's it. Well, okay, but you don't know what all the circumstances are in that situation.
Right.
And sometimes what you find out on Monday as being, there's no issues. I heard everything's fine. By Friday, there could be a world of problems that you never hear about because someone's too embarrassed to tell you. They're very excited to say everything worked out great, but when it goes poorly, they're not going to come to you and say, actually, everything fell apart, and now I'm majorly embarrassed, and I'm going to tell as many people as I can how embarrassed I am. That's not going to happen.
No, and it's one of those things that people very rarely ever celebrate the win, but they're very quickly to let people know of, I guess, like some of the negative things that happen. It's like the bad beats that they receive in life. So yeah, you might be one of those people that have sold successfully, bought successfully for sale by owner, and that does happen, again, frequently. It's not the most common, but it does happen. But for those that do this on your own, it's the single largest financial transaction you're going to make in a lifetime. What else are you going to drop $200,000 on in one swing? I mean, it's a massive, massive transaction. If you are not prepared to cut your own hair, right? I don't even have any of mine. But if you're not prepared to, grow your own food, if you're not prepared to do some of the things, why would you take this single largest financial transaction without any form of representation, whether it's from my side of the fence, from the real estate, industry, whether it's from your legal side of the title search? Why on earth would you just go and say, assuming you had a big bag of money, it's not. I don't know. And we do run into this. It happens. Man, I must get at least several dozen phone calls a year. Hey, I bought this property for sale by owner or at a auction or whatever. What does it mean that, West Virginia has, what does this letter mean? They're saying that I now owe money towards this past debt. It happens. At that point, I got to smack myself in the head and say, why didn't you call me first? Why didn't you call Tony?
Right. No, it's true. And then people are kicking themselves. And then in some instances, they just get mad at everybody else. It's like, oh, well, this is not my fault. It's this person's fault or that person's fault. Well, you have to take accountability for your own actions. If you went to people ahead of time and they didn't find it, then you're right. They're all in it together then. There was a mistake that was made. But if you just decided not to exercise due diligence and try to fix it on the back end and blame other people, nobody else's fault but your own. And you can avoid that. And just as an example, you can spend, everybody's situation is different. So I'm using these numbers as an example. But if you decide you're going to spend $200,000 on a house and you spend $500 to do a title search, and it turns out that there's a lien on the house that's going to devalue your home. Let's say there's a, $300,000 lien on this house that you're going to buy for $200,000. You just spend $500 to save yourself $300,000 in problems.
Right.
Which to me, that's worth it every day of the week.
Yeah, and this kind of stuff does happen, I would say, more in a specific range that I've never seen anything so drastic, at least not in the Ohio Valley, as far as like price difference or over leveraged property. But when you're in the investor range, when you get into REO homes, repossessed homes for foreclosures, things of that nature, the reason why people usually go into those circumstances is because financial distress. And oftentimes those lead to other complications in life and things. That's where people kind of abandon hope and the property condition goes down, and you get all these would-be investors that come out, which again, I'm not trying to discourage people from, getting into the market. But what I guess I'm trying to discourage is people making rash decisions without having proper advice if you've never done it before. And your services, like you said, spending $500 for a title search to save them a potential pitfall pertaining to monetary value that, from liens attached to the property or possessory interest or whatever, down the line.
Right.
I don't know of any other better. If you're willing to spend $30,000 on a fixer-upper, why wouldn't you spend $500 on a title search? You see what I'm saying?
Right.
I mean, it's
right.
Out of the two, it's the better of the deal.
Right, exactly. And whether it's 500 or 1,500, whatever the
Whatever,
case may
yeah.
be, it's
I'm sorry,
it's worth
yeah,
it. And do your due diligence is going to save you money in the short term. Then it's going to, if you don't do due diligence to save your 500 or 1,500, it's going to cost you thousands or tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands potentially in the future, just digging out of this problem.
Sure.
So I think it's well worth the time, the energy, the money. And again, all we're doing is making sure that you're getting what you pay for.
Sure.
That's it. Plain and simple. You're getting what you pay for.
You're not the bad guy for giving bad news. It's not don't shoot the messenger kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. And in a lot of cases, you can say, okay, here's what we can do to fix this problem.
Right.
So let's go about fixing it, which is still going to save you a lot of time, energy, and headache in the future.
Sure.
Do it now, fix it, and then you'll be fine.
Yep. And Harvey Goodman Realtor just liked, so I'm guessing that's Tim. Thank you for liking the stream.
I appreciate it.
Yeah, we're getting towards the end of this too. So any other words of wisdom or anything else you might want to offer as far as insights? We'll put your contact information obviously in the post as well.
Yeah, just to remind people, this is more an academic discussion.
Sure.
Specific circumstances need their own special set of solutions in all likelihood. So if you have those issues, even if you don't come to me, come to a professional to talk these things out and to make sure that all of your options, you check all those boxes. Because if you don't, it really can come back to burn you later on. And it's going to be way worse later than it is now, no matter how bad you think it's going to be now. That's my only advice to people.
Yeah. And don't, to expand upon it, I would rather lose a deal, even if it was a house I really, really wanted. I'd rather get the bad news on that deal and try to resolve those issues at that time rather than to force the deal to go through and to inherit the issues later.
Exactly.
It's much wiser of a decision. There will always be another opportunity. There will always be another property. If you really have to have it, maybe it's the house that's right next door to the house that you grew up and you want to be next to grandma's house or vice versa. Who knows? Everyone has their own different their own different reasons for doing things. I get it. So maybe you're that right buyer for that property and you're going to stick around and you're going to make this work by any means necessary. But by no means should you just try to push the narrative through. Take the advice from the professionals as it's dispensed, and you're going to have a lot easier of a time in life dealing with the things up front rather than retroactively.
Absolutely. And if this is I gotta have it, then okay, that there are going to be options to fix the issues, and then you can exercise those options and fix the issues again ahead of time rather than later.
And that's also
worse later.
That's also what you're here for.
Yes,
you're not here just for bad news, which I feel
exactly.
like we talk. You're also here to help, and then we'll be singing your praises when you finally make it all happen for us.
Right, exactly. And you're going to get exactly what you expected. You're going to be much happier going forward.
Fantastic.
Much happier than if you did nothing, for sure.
I couldn't agree more. All right. Well, we've been live for a little while. Anyways, thanks everybody for watching. Tony, you're always welcome back to come here again. We'll leave the seat open for you, but we'll see you guys next time.
Thanks for having me. See you next time.